Welcome back, fellow soldiers, to this week's or last week's Developers Briefing. That is Developers Briefing number 87. Due to a busy weekend and some other stuff I had to do, I'm a little bit behind schedule, so this is why we're going to have a look at last week's Developers Briefing today, but this also gives me the opportunity to also have a closer look at patch number 12 that also released today on August 3rd. So in this video, you'll get some information and a sum up of last week's developers briefing, which is very interesting. Stay tuned for that one. And we'll also have a look at what changed with the patch number 12 that has been released today and should fix some problems. So since we are having a look at both of these, developers briefing and the patch, I'm going to mix up the topics a little bit, but in the end you'll get 100% of the information, and I'm pretty sure you can take something out of it today, so really stay tuned for the whole thing. It's gonna be very interesting, and for the ones that are usually just listening to my beautiful angelic voice, it definitely pays out to also pay attention to the images that I'll show throughout my reading that I'll do to you and throughout the information that you'll get from the patch, since the developers have included a lot of very interesting images in the developers briefing. So yeah, let's have a closer look at it and jump right into it. First up, and that's also how Max, the developer, is opening the developers briefing, the developers are talking about that big problem, or that specific problem that we've all dealt with in the past few days when playing Hell Let Loose, and that were the crashes and the performance issues. And for that, Max is telling in the developers briefing that the whole team is working on those issues and that they could pin down the issues to 3 major problems, and that they could solve 2 major problems of them for good, but 1 that is still remaining. And that sadly still is the same case with today's patch note that came out. So they weren't able yet to fix that big problem, since that problem enters the physics black box, as they write, within the engine code, and that makes it very hard to solve and also to pinpoint it. So it will take some more time for the devs to fix that big problem. What the devs write though in today's patch notes is that they were able to give a performance boost with some stuff that they could solve, some minor problems, and players should now be able to experience a FPS boost of about 5 FPS or more throughout the whole game, and that should also help to work on that bigger problem. What they also saw and found is that when they were 4 to 5 body parts spawning at the same time, maybe with a explosion or something like that, then there will be a huge FPS drops. That's what they saw when trying and testing. So they now reset the time for the and despawning of those body parts to 1 second, I believe, and they think that this also should improve the FPS bottleneck, the CPU bottleneck that players experienced through this problem. So that's another thing that the devs are working on and were able to solve here, and I hope that this will definitely be noticeable when playing. I haven't been able to play since the new patch, but I'll definitely have a look at it. Now, coming to some of the goodies that the developers are bringing to us or presenting to us in last week's developers briefing, and that is some insight into ongoing map overhauls that concern the map Hurtgen Forest. Hurtgen Forest has been a map that was quite celebrated when it came up, I think, because it was just something else with all the trees and the landscape with the hills, and then it kind of got worn out over time. People weren't that excited anymore to play it, so the devs also want to make it more interesting to play on that. And of course they want to keep it as historically accurate as possible. So in the coming few minutes I'm going to read to you what the developers are saying about the new map overhaul that will be presented to us in upcoming updates. And you'll also be able to see some images out of that map overhaul. The images are very cool and definitely have the effect that I want to play again on that map, and I think that should be the purpose of those. Yeah, enjoy that, and I'll let Max, I think the developer that was writing about that, take over, and I'll read to you what he's saying about the overhaul. Previously, Hurtgen largely felt like a very dense forest map with some open and ugly wasteland full of floating tree stumps and objects whose main purpose it felt like was to block you placing a garrison or to totally trap your vehicle. Armor was really difficult to play effectively, and while the forest was dense, it wasn't dense enough to make any area properly defendable. Nearly all engagements took place at 50 to 100 meter ranges, except at the Scar. With our Hurtgen rework, we've separated out the different biomes to match the battlefield of the day, but far more clearly and with greater separation of gameplay styles. Hurtgen now has the typical dense European pine forest, but the trees have been scaled correctly and more light is let through the canopy to the floor. There is greater density of built fortifications, trenches, bunkers and foxholes, as well as much larger usage of blocking elements like barbed wire. This now better emulates the defenses in the forest during the battle and will provide defenders with the ability to better create choke points and tactical challenges the attackers will need to overcome. The second biome is the most unique to the overhaul so far, and that is the destroyed forest. Burning trees, ashen earth and shell holes litter the ground to create a World War I-esque wasteland for you to fight your way across. Thirdly, a grass mountainous plain biome has been added on the northwestern side of the map where the Siegfried Line Dragon's Teeth are. This area provides huge vertical gameplay and will be a key location for armor to control in the push back and forth across the map. Prepare for long-ranged firefights from peak to peak as you assault uphill. Lastly, the riverbed in the center of the map is now a functional river, requiring each team to consider the necessity to own one of the 3 crossing points in order to make any sort of push. Hurtgen will have offensive mode added for both teams, with separate weather conditions each time to truly widen the experience and replayability. So much for what the developers are saying about the ongoing rework of the Hurtgen forest. For me, it sounds awesome, especially the different biomes. I think 4 they mentioned will be very interesting, that you'll fight in one, get to the other, and you have to adjust your gameplay style. So that'll definitely be interesting. I think that they worked on the fact that armor was very difficult to play. Definitely will improve the gameplay, since the armor wasn't very useful until now. It was only able to just drive on the road, and there it was most of the time just ambushed and destroyed. And if you have been watching now, you are also able to see some of the in-game shots that the developers are including of some parts of the new map, Hurtgen Forest. And if you ask me, this just looks amazing. The biomes and the different areas look very interesting for the eye. Of course, there's still a lot to be done, but it will definitely be interesting tactical-wise to play on those maps. And it will give a new challenge to a lot of squad leaders and also the player base. Now, after reading to you and discussing what we think about the new Hurtgen Forest or the ongoing work on Hurtgen Forest map, I want to come back to today's patch fix thingy that the developers released and give you some of the remaining key information that you have to know for the upcoming few days until we get the next patch or the next developers briefing. I think the most important few things were that they eliminated 2 of the 3 main problems. They still have that one big one that goes on the physics black box that they have to solve, but rest assured they are working on that one. If you check out the patch itself, you'll find 6 speculative fixes. Those fixes were collected and also proposed partially by the community and also by the developers. So there are 6 different ways how you can push up your experience and especially your performance. Check them out if you have big problems. Maybe you are lucky and they can help you or will improve your performance. Who knows, but it's definitely worth a try. Now, to end this developers briefing and patch note combination, I have 2 more things for you that are very important that will change or have been changed with the patch note. First one is that enemy garrisons in enemy territory now are able to be destroyed by your forces, but they will take 30 seconds to be destroyed. Until now, with the new update, it wasn't possible to destroy them. Now it will be possible, but it will take longer and expose you for a longer time to enemy fire, just so you know. And also directly tying into that is that the red mark on your garrison, when you are having a look at the map that you'll see when enemies are close by, is now separated in 2 different signs. If enemies are close by, you'll see it as usual as you've seen it before with a exclamation mark, I think. But if the Gary is being overrun by the enemy, it will turn red. So you'll also know that there's no point really in spawning there anymore. And you'll also know why you can't spawn anymore, because the Gary is being overrun. If that is a good thing or not, I'm not so sure yet, especially because it gives you a lot of information about the enemy without being in-game, with just looking at the map from the main screen and helping your squad mates. But yeah, we'll see how the community reacts and how it will play in-game. So that's been it for last week's developers briefing and also the patch notes. I hope you enjoyed the content I provided. If you did so, leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna see each other on the battlefield.